UX designer from the United Nations. So I'm sure many of them are curious. So if any of you here are new to this weekly webinar, or we do this every week, the reason why we're doing this is because COVID has made a lot of these UX events, like the organizers just stopped organizing UX events in general. So there's actually less events for you to go and less events for you to learn from. And because I run a company that specializes in helping mid-career professionals learn about UX design, therefore I started first inviting my ex-students, and then I started inviting different design leaders from Asia Pacific to come in and share a little bit more about their work and their career journey and how they got involved in the user experience design industry. So if this is your first time, welcome. I'm Daylon. I'm the founder of CuriousCore. And let me just make a really quick introduction for our guests here, Nick, today. Nick is actually originally from the United States. He's currently based in Bangkok and works for the United Nations Disaster Risk Reduction team, right? And Nick is very experienced in terms of designing digital experiences and works for people through strategic planning, user research, and user-centered design principles. So I met Nick through LinkedIn, and also I think he reached out to me because he was looking to talk to different UX designers here in the region, and we got a chance to catch up over several conversations to understand a bit about the work he does. So I'll be asking him today about the work he does, his career journey, as well as his experience working in the region, especially finding talents in the region to work with. So welcome, Nick. I'm not sure if is there anything else to fill up in terms of your bio?
No, that's great. Thank you. Thank you very much for that introduction.
Awesome.
Where do you want to start?
Yeah, let's start by actually sharing, like, what do you do at the United Nations? Yeah.
Okay, good place to start. Well, first of all, thank you everybody for being here. Thank you for being interested in this. I hope I can do it justice and answer your questions, and definitely happy to try to address some topics or things that you'd like to know about the UN or working in the UN, getting a job in the UN, things like that. So put your questions there, and I think we'll correct me if I'm wrong, Daylon, but we'll have a chance to do some like Q&A later.
Yeah, we will.
Cool. Okay. So let's see. Just a quick little bit of an overview about the UN. I think will kind of help you to understand the context that I work in. So the UN system itself is huge and comprised of lots and lots of different agencies or entities. So there's kind of a core set of UN bodies, things that you've probably heard of, like the Security Council or the Secretariat or other bodies like that are kind of the core parts of the UN that do the different basic functions. And then there are lots and lots of different programs and funds that have spun off of that original charter of the UN. So for example, things like the World Food Program, United Nations Development Program, UNDP, UNICEF, the Children's Fund, and lots of others are all essentially their own. They're essentially kind of like their own agencies, really. So they have actually they're part of the UN system, but they actually have a good amount of freedom in how they execute their mission and how they do their work. And a lot of the reason for that is because of funding. So many of those types of agencies have become more independent because they actually do their own fundraising. So, only a certain part of the UN, like I think at this point, it's probably a relatively like a smaller chunk is actually funded by the common General Assembly. So some of the UN gets its money from the General Assembly, which is gotten from the different member states. But a lot of the UN actually does its work by fundraising for itself. So different donor countries, particularly in regions that have, let's say, more exposure to disasters or things like that. They're very interested in funding work in that area, in their own areas. So they'll oftentimes fund certain projects in our region. So just to kind of like give you the sense about a couple things. One, that the UN it's like pretty complicated. There's lots of different agencies and entities. They all kind of work differently, and some of those agencies and entities actually have really great digital teams, and are a bit more advanced, I guess you could say, with regard to um, how far along they are in building up their digital practice. So some like don't have it at all, and others have done a really good job. I think just to name a couple, UNICEF is pretty good. The UN Women Agency is pretty good. UNDP is quite large. World Food Program also has a pretty good digital team, but that's not necessarily the norm. I would say overall, I'd say a lot of the UN is still, maybe like half is still kind of a bit behind, I would say, in terms of, really thinking about digital design, and the fact that you have to really have good like talent and ability in the digital space, because it's just how we all do business now. So I would say like half is kind of like maybe 5 to 10 years behind, and then the other half is like sort of pretty much modern, and are recruiting designers and information architects and user researchers and things like that. There's also quite a lot of good like content work that's being done in the UN too. So anyway, that's kind of a little bit of a tangent, but I just wanted to give sort of a background of the UN. So myself, I work in a relatively small office inside of the Secretariat organ of the UN, which is called the Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. And we are pretty tiny. We're about 120 people total, and that includes people that are working on the substantive, like the programmatic side. So actually, like coming up with programs and working with countries and regions to actually do our work. And then it includes our team as well. So our team is about, I'd say we've got our structure is kind of like this. We've got a comms team and a knowledge management team, which is comprised of some folks that work on our disaster risk knowledge platform called Prevention Web. That's like a handful of folks with some editors. Then we've got like probably 4 or 5 communications folks. And then we have myself, I'm kind of the design lead. And we've got a tech lead, we've got a project coordinator, and then we've got another developer. And those are all folks that are on staff. And then we work a lot with contractors, either external vendors or lots of consultants as well. Actually, that's a way that we get a lot done, because we're kind of constantly have too much work that we can actually take on. So a lot of the work that I do personally is ensuring that basically like managing design as it's being done by others. So keeping an eye on quality, doing hiring, things like that. So that's a little bit about the team and a little bit about the organization. Just in case you're interested, our organization is really the main office of the UN that is trying to think about how to actually prevent disasters from happening in the first place, which is a very different thing than what you might kind of associate with UN and kind of disasters. Usually when people hear what I do, they're kind of usually asking me, so do you do disaster response work? Like you go in after there's an earthquake or a hurricane or something like that. But actually, we don't do anything on the disaster response side. There's much bigger UN agencies that are involved with that work. We actually are pretty much solely focused on trying to help countries make sense of their own data that they have historically about disasters in their own country and in their own region, and basically make like help them get the ability to make policy decisions and change their development, so that their development becomes sustainable in a way where you're not creating new exposure. Like you're not building new schools that are in a flood zone or tsunami risk area, things like that. So we're actually like trying to prevent that disaster from ever happening in the first place, which is a really tricky thing to do because when you have your success, it just means like the absence of a disaster. So it's really difficult to measure success, and then I think that's one of the frustrating parts about it, is that you don't really ever see the result of your work per se. So it's very indirect, very long term.
Could I ask,
Yeah.
and thanks for sharing, like, and giving us the context of how the United Nations work. And it's often kind of something that we miss out, that actually UN is made up of several sub-organizations rather than one big organ. And I was just wondering, in your work and in your job, are you asked to think about future scenario, or are you kind of like, planning and doing things for the present, right? Are you looking at how do you communicate certain things better? Yeah, just kind of interested, what's the percentage of your work in terms of looking at disaster prevention? Yeah.
So you mean like so basically from the program side, like how much of it is looking ahead versus?
Yeah, I mean, specifically for your own role as a UX designer, because I'm sure your organization looks at disaster reduction, which is more future scenario planning. But then for your role as a UX designer, do you get involved in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. It definitely, so yes, exactly what you said. So typically we'll plan on something like at least like a 15-year time horizon with respect to like targets and goals that we're trying to meet. So in 2015, the UNDRR convened the member states in Japan, and they came in Sendai, Japan, and came up with something called the Sendai Framework, which is basically like, this is a set of ideals and goals and targets that we want to, as a world, reach by 2030. So the Sendai Framework has a 15-year lifespan essentially, and as a UX designer, that directly impacts like how I have to think about the work, because we basically have to be then thinking about, okay, this is a real example. Like at the beginning of that period of time, we wanted to build a kind of almost like an aggregate system tool that would allow countries to report sort of their high-level disaster risk data that they had each year, ongoing, into a high-level tool that could then be used to sort of understand what was the kind of world state of progress toward these targets and goals, and in that area, in the preventing disasters. So like things like mortality caused by disaster, broken down by different disaggregation. So like gender and age and things like that. Different kind of losses that countries have experienced due to disasters. Whether or not a country has actually created a disaster reduction plan for themselves, and then whether that plan is like good, on a number of different criteria. So we built this tool that was basically like, trying to understand the sort of the state. And that tool, when we set out to design it, we basically understood like, yeah, we have to ensure that this is going to go on until 2030, because we know we're going to be continuing that that collection across that whole period of time. So we we built it in a relatively modern way. So we built it with Angular, and it's a like a single page application, API based, and pretty modular. And you have to go with what you what you have available to a certain extent, but it also changes how you think about, let's say, procurement, or like the kind of team and skills that you have on a project that is going to be going for such a long time. So for example, that long time span informed our decision to go with an internal UN team. We have a few centers around the world where it's basically like enterprise software development centers. So there's some each of those probably has maybe 50 or 100 developers of different kinds, and some tech leads, some QA folks. They don't really have any UX folks, because they're mostly programming focused. But we basically partnered with them because what we needed was a relationship that we could, like, we was going to be solid, that we could say, like, all right, we can contract with you easily. It's basically like an MOU, and we can ensure that, like, the people that are working on this system, on this tool for us, are going to be around for a while. The team is going to be around for a while. It's going to be ongoing, and knowledge is going to be, like, built up about this program. So
But
yeah, go
sorry
ahead.
to interrupt. Maybe I'll just kind of like focus on some of the things.
Yeah,
And thanks
please.
for sharing on the project as well. What I'm hearing you say is that the products that you built in your team has a longer term view than many of the products that we see out there, because some of these products have 10-year goals and stuff like that. So you kind of need to think about the technology, but also like the design from ground up, and that also affects your composition in terms of the team. I was wondering, you like what do you actually do on a day-to-day basis, like as a UX designer? Because you're working remotely, right? And I understand your team is distributed. So yeah, how do you guys work? Yeah.
Yeah, good question. Thank you. And yeah, please keep me on track, because I will wander otherwise with my answers.
Yes.
Yeah, so we have about 6 or 7 offices around the world. Our design and technology team is here, based in Bangkok, partly because it's actually close to one of those enterprise development centers that I mentioned. So before COVID, I was going in to the UN SCAP campus here in Bangkok. Now that we're in this time of COVID, yeah, pretty much everyone is working remotely. So uh, from that perspective, it wasn't too big of a shift, since we're all kind of, you know, we were already working remotely. Like, we kind of, our team basically works for an office in the Americas. So there's an office in Panama, there's an office in Europe, there's Europe and, well, 2 offices in Europe, one in Geneva, one in Germany, um, one in Japan, one in South Korea. Um, and one in the let's see, one in Cairo, and I
Mm,
may be missing one, Nairobi as well. So we get we basically, like, have to serve all of those offices. There's a certain amount of, like, headquarters, flow, where, like, projects will,
yeah.
are ideally supposed to, like, flow into the center and then kind of get prioritized out. But
Yeah.
oftentimes we find ourselves working directly with
Yeah.
those offices. Yeah.
Any software or tools that you use on a daily basis that really helps you work with, I would say a decentralized team uh, like yours?
Yes, absolutely. I would say the most critical one um, is finding a tool that can help make your work, and, like, what you're doing, like your tasks and your work and your the things that you kind of have going on and need prioritization, like externalized and visible. So for us, the UN just switched over to the Microsoft suite of things. So we are using Teams, Microsoft Teams, which has a
Mm.
decent kind of Kanban board style thing.
Okay.
But you can use anything like that. I'd say that's number one probably.
For project management. So
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And we're getting questions from the crowd, so that's great. I would. So first question is from Kurian. Kurian's asking from the audience, what would be some of the techniques you use to speculate or rather say forecast or anticipate the requirements and use cases 10 to 15 years later?
That's a good one. I would say I'd say that's pretty hard to do. I think the best way that we try to approach that is by doing things with like an open data, open source perspective. So, if we're working with a vendor, like we make sure that that's a criteria, and also thinking about like data standards and format, because a lot of what we're doing is working, building tools that let people manage data and take data in and out. And so I think what's important to me, and I've been thinking a lot about since I've been here, is like making those data formats kind of standard. So just kind of a side note is that there's not a lot of standard in DRR data. So anyways, I'd say like going to like fundamentals about data standards is is like the
Yeah.
easiest
Could I,
answer to that.
if I were to ask from sort of like an abstract level, it really sounds like you do a lot of data products, right? And do a lot with like helping your stakeholders understand the data at hand. Do you do a lot of, I'd say, analysis of past data, or how do you kind of like do your forecasts or speculation then? Is it from the past, or is it like, where we're just gonna look at all these 5 possible scenarios and deal with the probabilities of it? Yeah.
So I don't really get too involved in that. It's mainly that we're trying to build the products for essentially for countries to do that work themselves. So,
Mm.
for example, we have a product that's basically like a disaster loss database
Yep.
system that's super old, like from the 90s, and it's just been around for a long time, and a lot of countries use it. So we are now looking at like revamping that and building into it because it's got a lot of adoption. um, you know and yeah, the whole idea is doing something where we're sort of like setting the guidelines, like this is the kind of data that you should be collecting, that you should be interested in. um, this is a good way to manage it, and then providing them with lots of ways to get that data in and out.
Mm.
So here's
That's wonderful.
APIs. Yeah, you can get
So
your
it's kind
data
of like
out other
empowering
system.
the
Hmm.
individual teams and countries. That's really wonderful. So we're getting more questions, and for those of you who just joined the call, we also have like a group of people from Facebook Live. We're asking questions on the Zoom channel. By monitoring Facebook, if you want, you can ask on Facebook as well in the comments. So thanks for joining. This is Nick from UX designer from the United Nations from Disaster Risk Reduction, and he is currently based in Bangkok. So Ivy asked, what's your most memorable project that you work for the UN, right? Like how is UX as a process relevant to the work that you do?
um, I would say probably the main way that it's relevant is in being like the person in the organization that understands like how to do things digitally, like how to do your business digitally. So it's kind of we don't have like a robust like built out UX team and product team. We don't have a CIO, things like that, since we're small. So for us, it is, I would say, the advantage of being a UX person in an organization like that is you really have a lot of you really have a lot of input into strategic thinking, like, you know, looking ahead for our organization and the work that we do, where should we be involved? What's the kind of like niche that we want to be in? Do we really want to be building like end user products, or do we want to be more in the space of like defining the standards? So I think, you know, helping the organization to kind of think about you know how to do digital, like where and what to do um, in that space is really important. So it's as much on like the as important for like the business, quote unquote business side, and
Mm,
like pushing the organization in the right way as it is for like actual UX work
yeah.
on a product.
I think that's great because this is kind of something in common that I see in a lot of the organizations I work with in Asia Pacific, where they're still kind of new to this idea of building digital products and digital transformation. In fact, many design teams or many product teams play a dual role of evangelizing change and evangelizing design, and at the same time also being
Yeah.
involved in the operations and being involved in building the necessary products to get the business running or delivering business value, so that the team is justified to stay on the payroll. So I definitely see that dichotomy over there. Mario is actually asking as well, would it be fair to state that it is statistics management in the work that you do versus a lot of data science and projection? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Yeah, we really like, yeah, we ourselves don't do the projection, right? It's more about
Mm,
building the tools to let the countries do that themselves.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I would say like just to add to that, that there are UN entities, especially in the different regions, that are like the statistics people. There's at SCAP here in Bangkok. They have a statistics division, and they just collect like and aggregate like all kinds of statistics. So they can they do a lot of that kind of management. We're at like a very broad level, and we're kind of like a little more focused in on this particular area. Yeah.
Mm, okay. Um, so Mario's follow-up was that in that case, do you experience a difference in how different countries manage statistics, especially when they have very different cultures? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. That's a very interesting question. So I personally have not gotten enough time to interact with all the different countries that use our products. That's a definite like gap that we have, because we have this symptom where we try to do too many things. Like we're building too many things. We're trying to meet too many places at once. So I would say that we need a deeper understanding for sure. Um, we do have like our program side, that's from a UX side, from a product development side. From the business, like substantive program side, they have a good, close relationship with a lot of the countries. That would be an interesting question for me to ask them. Just from what I've seen, yes, I think that is definitely true. I mean, there's definitely different kind of views on data and on what it means. I mean, there are countries, there are like European countries where, they won't validate their data because they can't be like 100% sure that it's exactly accurate. And then there's other countries that are in other places that are much more like flexible, like fluid with it, and they want to like take the meaning that they can get out of it, at this time, and they're not like too worried. So that's an example that I've seen in person, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome. So to segue to a career question, perhaps to ask Ashana, if I'm not sure if I'm butchering your name, forgive me if I am, is asking you, how did you map your career, right? Did you plan to be in the humanitarian sector? And like, yeah, I'll ask a follow-up question after you answer that.
Thank you for the question. No, I did not. I'm pretty bad about planning my career. I just sort of like do things that seem interesting. Although I have always been like ever since my first job, I was pretty interested in doing things like for the public sector, like for the public good. I think I don't know. I just always found the type of work and the cultures, I guess, that go along with that type of work to be rewarding. So I worked for a bunch of different, like I worked for government for a while. I worked for a nonprofit, a couple nonprofits, and did different things, mostly in the UX design area. And I just kind of followed that like feeling that like I really like the culture. I like the people. I like that people are in this to try to do good work. And just this is an extra thought that you didn't ask for, but
Sure.
I've learned that that in governments and these like the UN and like these kinds of places like people like there's always really good like excellent civil servants, and they really doing good great work and trying really hard, and oftentimes it's not that they like just need some digital team parachuted in. It's usually that they there's lots of issues with bureaucracy and things that 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 as a UX practitioner like you can help with by, let's say, mapping like a different approach to solving a particular HR or hiring problem. It's more about like the thinking, and kind of the
Do
attitude.
you
And
do you actually get
yeah,
involved in that in those as well, like HR and hiring problem solving?
uh not too much, not in the UN.
Mm,
We I mean I've I've had to like be involved in it to a certain extent just because we're doing, I'm like I have to, as like
yeah,
the digital person, like you have to help write the
yeah,
contract, for
exactly.
the vendor.
Yeah, and a job description.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
someone was asking, if I'm looking to enter the humanitarian sector, and you know, what advice would you have to give?
Okay, yes, there are a few different entry pathways. Um, excuse me, sorry. There's a few things. So one is there's something called the UN Young Professionals Program, and that's for folks that are recently graduated or pretty early on in their career. So it's a special application type that you can do, and I think you take a test, and there's kind of a pathway in, and then you basically get experience, and then you can get prioritized for finding jobs later. So that is one I know of. There's also another program called UNV, which is UN Volunteers. There's it's pretty much like a slightly paid internship. So that is typically for people that have found, like, if you have a UN presence of some kind, UN agency, in your country, let's say, yeah, yes, thank you for putting that link in there. You can apply to be a UNV, and you say what your skills are, and then folks that are looking for UNVs, because essentially I think it's pretty low pay. It's something like maybe $5,000 a year or something like that. Like you're almost unpaid. um, so that's not great. So like you have to be in a position where you could afford to do that. But that is a way that is a typical like bridge, that you can get to. Yeah.
What about in terms of working in a public sector setting, right? Or work, because I understand you have work experience being in the private sector, because now you're in the public sector. Is there any advice you would give for someone who's working in the public sector and for the public sector?
Yeah. I mean, from what I have noticed, I would say that the UN doesn't, just as like generally, has not hired, doesn't usually hire entry level folks. And actually, this is sort of a slightly tangential but related to your question, Daylon. I would say that probably the UN is not like the best place to become like a UX designer. You want to work in an environment like that where like I don't have a UX mentor, I don't I don't have support like that. Like if I came in and tried, as my first or second job here, I think it would be quite challenging, and I don't think I would learn to do things the right way. I'd probably learn lots of bad habits. So I actually think I would consider it an advantage to start somewhere else, start in the private sector, and build up skills. I mean, because at the end of the day, it's all of the same things are relevant, whatever sector you're in. It's about like being thoughtful and being able to communicate well and persuading people about the value of your vision, and why you think like doing this thing is a good thing. Like those are like the most important core skills, and then you have the rest of your UX skills to say that like, yes, I can do user research, I can do usability tests, etc.
Yeah. So Nick, let's talk a little bit about the talent in this region. Like, can you describe a little bit? Is it hard to find people to work with, experienced talent to work with in this region?
Yes, it is. We have tried so in Thailand, we've tried to recruit interns and even some consultant UX folks, and we really haven't had much luck. Like when we do a job posting, we'll typically get people from anywhere, well, like the rest of the world. We'll get folks from China, sometimes from the US, sometimes from Europe, from France, from Africa, but not really not many Southeast Asian countries. And I wonder why that is.
Maybe they haven't heard about it.
Maybe, yeah,
Yeah,
it could well be. And we have a terrible job site also.
yeah. Okay. So when you're kind of like interviewing these talents, what's your sense? What is kind of the missing skills that you're seeing when you're talking to them?
Let's see. I'd say I'd say so it kind of depends what you're talking about. If we're talking about interns, it's one thing. If you're talking about a consultant, it's another thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Let's start with the intern first.
so for interns, really we don't necessarily like, we kind of look for anyone that's just generally competent, that kind of shows in their application that
Mm.
they've like looked into what UNDRR is a little bit, and
Mm.
like reflected that in their letter and in their application. And then if they have some kind of digital experience, then that's great, but for at least from the intern perspective, we don't need you to have lots of skills or really like that many digital skills. If you have some exposure, or maybe like a sample project, then that would be plenty. I mean, as it is, I think it's we're mostly looking to find people that are thoughtful and that are
Mm.
interested in the work.
Awesome. And I recall that you mentioned that there's no remuneration for the internship.
That is correct. Yeah, that is a
Yeah.
problem in the whole UN system.
Mm.
So that's actually something there's some efforts to try to change right now.
Okay, not to worry about it. And for consultants, what do you see that's missing from the consultants who are kind of coming to you and saying, hey, we would like to work for you, but you're interviewing them. Yeah, what are the gaps?
Yes, consultant UX designers. I've hired a couple since we've been here. I would say probably. I mean, probably the biggest thing is actually, this is like weird, but in the actual like effort in the application, like more often, like, you'd be surprised how often you'll get an application where it's just sort of like copy and pasted, but it like seems like it wasn't really for that job, so I mean, like on a basic level, like I think piece of advice for just getting any job is to really and I'm sure this is probably like
Yeah.
everyone already knows this, but like work on the application, try to actually match, to reflect like your interest in that particular position and the letters, the cover letter. I'd say that's the biggest piece of advice. I think we have had, I'm trying to think if there's like specific skills. I can't think of any off the top of my head,
That's
Daylon.
okay. I think we discuss in general that maybe because they're not so easy to find or they don't come to you. So yeah, just in general, I'll ask on behalf of the audience, are you guys looking for interns and are you guys looking for consultants, right? Because I'm sure there's some here in the audience tonight.
Yeah, for sure. So we are almost always looking for both. We are relatively small, so I would say, you can look at UNDRR, but definitely like the broader UN job site. And then I think there's another, like it's called like UN. So the link that Daylon posted is the official one, and then there's another one that's like
Mm,
unjobs.org or something like that that I think is like an aggregator. So
mm,
this careers.un.org actually doesn't pull all of the UN jobs from all the entities. It only pulls a subset. So your
mm.
best bet is actually to look at that other site, as ridiculous as that is,
Yeah, there
to
are
to
multiple
find.
sites.
Yeah,
I found it. Yes, I'll put it in the chat.
yes, look there, and I think you can do a search there by design. Like if you just search the listings for
Yeah.
design, you can actually start to see which ones are
Mhm.
are asking about design and
Yeah,
thinking about design.
great. So thanks for sharing that. For those of you who just joined, this is Nick from the UN Risk Reduction Team. Just sharing with us about his career. Georgina from the audience asked me this question, and I think it's a pretty common situation because not every organization who hires a UX designer actually have a design leader or a design manager or mentor. So she's asking if there are no mentors in my organization, how do I get mentorship? How do I kind of grow as a designer? Yeah.
That's a great question. I mean, I would say by building connections, like through things like this, is a big one.
Thank you.
In I don't know about Singapore, if you're there, if you're in Singapore, but in Bangkok we have a UX happy hour. So there's like a Facebook group for that, and then there's an in-person. With COVID, everything's weird, but
Yeah.
normally there would be like a monthly get together, and I think if you have access to a community like that in person, like, you can actually go out and meet people and talk to people. That's probably a really good way. Trying to think if there's other ways off the top of my head. What do you suggest
Well,
for that, Daylon?
for me, well, okay, I'm trying not to promote our programs, but we do have a 4-month coaching program that's specifically for people to break into the industry. That's one, and definitely the mentorships from me and as well as some of the guest instructors I invite. But having said that, a lot of what I do is just to kind of like talk to people, right? I will,
Yep.
of course, kind of like reach out to design leaders and get them to like see if they're interested in sort of like a video chat. And I think generally the user experience design industry is very open to sharing,
Agreed.
and that you have the opportunity to do that by kind of like using sites. There's actually a interesting site which does this. It's called ADP List. I'm sure some folks here are also on the list and have benefited by actually using it. In fact, I ask all my coaching clients to kind of reach out to people on the list and talk to them. So yeah, you can definitely use lists like that. You can join our webinars. You can interact with us. You can be part of our newsletters. I read a lot as well. But I don't just read about UX. I read about other things. I read about product management. I read about business as well. So I think all these help with the growth as a designer, and also depends on what you want to specialize in. Nick, do you find yourself reading a lot of data books since you're handling so much data products?
No, not as many as I should. Um,
That's an honest answer.
I think yeah. Generally, I find myself just being like pretty tired, like
Mm,
constantly because we're managing like lots of different products.
yeah.
And so it's sort of, like the data, yes, that's one big part, but there's lots of other tools and things too. So I feel like, I haven't been able to dive as deep as I would like to in any one area.
Yeah.
I was going to add one resource though. I think Twitter is
Mm,
actually really good.
mm,
Um, there's plenty of like Twitter that's not helpful, but if you can start to slowly find you know folks in the design community that are on Twitter, um, there's some pretty amazing resources that I've seen. Things that people have identified. Like reading things on Medium or thoughts or like reflections that people will tweet about that will somehow like make their way into my brain. And I think also like I've seen people that are just starting out engage with other designers on Twitter and with good
mm,
good results. Like it's a
yeah.
conversation.
Yeah. So, Nick, I think I didn't manage to ask this from you. You sort of got into the UX industry through a master degree program in information studies and human-computer interaction. So, just to ask, like how has that sort of played a role in, or your education played a role in your sort of like your career development? Yeah, and then I'll ask you a follow-up question on that.
Yes. I mean, I think that, yeah, education is very helpful. Like, I think you can certainly do this without having higher education. Like, as I mentioned earlier, if you are thoughtful and competent and like interested, that's and can communicate well and persuade people. I think that will take you like as far as you want to go.
Mm,
But that being said, it's good for unlocking certain doors. Like, for example, I think the UN, like when you apply to a UN position, they want you to either have a certain number of years of experience. This is not including the entry level ones, but they want you to have either a certain number, either like a degree or a certain number of years of experience. So like that can help, but you can substitute it for experience too. um, Thinking about, I think a lot of it is, it's like as important do to do education programs as it is to reflect, like as you're working, like wherever you are working now, whatever you're doing. I feel like there's always transferable skills. It's just a matter of like
mm,
self-reflection and like, how did I approach that project or problem, and then
mm.
applying that idea and lesson to your next application, I feel.
Yeah. So Lynn from the audience is asking a question about building products that empower people and in policy planning. Uh, and she's saying that, well, she wrote a long one. So she's saying there's a slant when it comes to presenting data, right? Because data can be manipulated and it can be
Yeah.
misrepresented as well.
Yeah.
uh, Especially when data lacks context. That is a big possibility of misrepresentation. Um, so if you're kind of designing products and you're just giving them that responsibility to use that product and whatever data that's there, what kind of mentality do you need to have when you're approaching when you're designing this product? Do you set like certain principles? Do you set certain philosophy about how do you prevent bad actors, or how do you prevent misuse of this data? Yeah.
That's a really good, interesting question. Hard question.
It is a very
um,
hard question then.
um, there's something that we try that we do. It's I'll paste this into the.
Mm,
This doesn't maybe answer all of it, but this is a really
yeah.
good resource set, and it's something that I refer to. Oops, sorry.
Oh
Let me
yeah,
post it.
I'll kind of Okay,
there.
got it. Digitalprinciples.org. Okay.
Digitalprinciples.org. So there are some principles here. So these are things that a set of principles that many UN agencies have endorsed, and we try to live up to these. So, there's ideas about open standards and addressing privacy and security, letting people opt out, things of that nature. I think your question though is a bit more subtle. I think it's hard. It's very difficult. I mean, I would say a lot of that work comes not from the product itself, but from all of the program support around the product. So, we have a tool, but we have frequent like user group meetings, and we have, before COVID, we would have like once a year where representatives from the Ministry of Health or whoever was the primary user of that tool could actually like come to the program office in Germany and meet with all the other folks from around the world, and there would be basically several days where they could discuss like how are we using it, what does the data mean, how are we getting meaning out of it, and so, and then we also have lots of training sessions and support from the region. So each regional office is responsible, is kind of like a caretaker and a guide for the set of countries in the region. So, that person from UNDRR that can reach out and like answer questions and does in-person training and is like kind of constantly flying around to different countries to support their use of that product in person. I think in reality, like that's a huge challenge. So it's a really, really interesting question, but I would say it probably happened, we do consider, like if we build it in a certain way, like, yeah, we don't want it to skew and, to be able to view it as skewed. So we try to be pretty transparent with, what's the source of this data, what transformations like happened on it for you to, that you're seeing in this analysis view. Another example is of giving context to data is it used to be actually, so when countries would capture their disaster risk data, it was just quantitative. And then we eventually added a place for them to add explanatory supportive
Qualitative
comment.
data.
Yeah. Exactly. So they could say like, this is the context of this, event, and we had these deaths because, we had this thing plus this other thing, and to try to like give more nuance. So then in the analysis view that we have, we had to figure out like, okay, how are we going to surface these kinds of qualitative comments when they're there? So we did that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's hard.
I'm sure it does. Yeah, like I'm. This is my first time looking at it as well. I think it's generally a very good set of principles that I practice as well. Unconsciously, I did not know this existed. So thank you for sharing, Nick. So let's do something more casual. Like since we're in Asia, let me ask you questions around. That's more about you, right? So I'm going to ask you a series of quick rapid questions, and thank you everyone in the audience for sharing your questions and asking Nick tonight. So let's start with food is a big part of our culture. So let me ask, what's your favorite Thai food?
That's a really hard one. Lately I've been going for this Thai khanom called khanom krok. It's like these little cupcake things, but they call it khanom krok Singapore. But then everyone I've talked to about that is like, they don't have that kind of thing there. It's like, well, why did you call it that? And I think they have like a Penang curry too, where like they don't have that curry there. Anyway.
Lovely. So what's in the dish called khanom krok? Like what's exactly inside?
It's basically like rice flour, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of like shredded coconut and salt, and it's essentially like cooked over in a like a cupcake pan, like they're small like that,
okay.
over coals. Really good.
Okay, interesting. Didn't know about that, didn't notice it, but thanks for sharing. And what is your favorite travel destination in Asia?
Ooh, that's a hard one. That's too hard. I don't know. I love Vietnamese food, so let's go with
Okay,
Hanoi.
let's go with Hanoi. Okay, wonderful. So let me ask maybe something closer to home. Walking Dead, Westworld, or Game of Thrones?
Ooh, Westworld, definitely.
Oh, you're a sci-fi fan. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What's your hobby like in general?
I have lots of different hobbies. I actually, for a long time, I have done silver and goldsmithing, so I do make like fabricated jewelry. And recently, I started getting into faceting, so like taking rough and faceting it into gemstones. So it's pretty niche, pretty weird. I'm a
Okay.
weirdo, but it's fun.
Okay. Last question would be, what inspires you the most in Asia?
I would say I am inspired by the by the cultures in Asia. I find that people are really welcoming and generous, and warm with their time and with their energy in a way that folks in the US or in Europe aren't always. So I would say that's one of my inspirations.
Lovely. Thanks for sharing, Nick, and thank you for participating in the webinar tonight. And before everyone goes, I'll just take a couple of minutes to share our upcoming events. Nick, feel free to stay around, and maybe if you like to interact with Nick off the record, we're going to open up a room for 15 to 20 minutes as well. So I'd like to share in terms of the upcoming events we're running. As I mentioned, I run a company called CuriousCore, and we are a digital design portfolio school. And we're very much focused on helping and serving the Asia Pacific community in user experience design and upskilling them on that skill. So if you enjoy this session and you really benefited from it, feel free to share your learnings and your thoughts, and feel free to use the hashtag leading into change, because it's all about change in this sector. We're working in tech over here, and it's also for some people a career change, right, for you. And if you share that, we'll definitely find you and share with you a 12-page UX career guide if you haven't already received that, or even kind of like reach out to you and see if there's anything I can help you with. And as I mentioned, because of COVID, many of the events were canceled physically. So we're doing a lot of our events digitally now. And I used to charge for running an intro to UX workshop. But for people who are new to the industry, I feel like this could be really a time for them to upskill and learn more about UX. So we run a free 1.5 hour workshop on alternate Mondays. So next Monday, we're running one. Feel free to donate to charity as well if you feel like you got value from it. So it's 8 p.m. to 9:30 p.m. Singapore time. And next week, we have a guest, Joseph from NTUC Income, which is a insurance provider. He's the experienced design manager and also previously in Educator, right, in a local institute of higher learning. One thing that's interesting about Joseph is that he was previously a product designer. So I met him when he was actually an industrial designer, and then he went into education, and then now he's in the transformation office. So a lot of what we do is not linear, right? As designers, we might be working on products one day, but we might be transforming organizations the next day. So I'll be getting him to share some of his thoughts on that. And as I mentioned, we are also running a coaching program. It's a 4-month coaching program, and we're enrolling for our next batch. If you're interested, feel free to reach out and talk to me. It's very specific for mid-career professionals and people who are committed to actually breaking into the UX industry. We do it very different from all the other boot camps you see out there, mainly because we focus on your communication skills and your strategic thinking skills, as well as building you a real portfolio, which accounts for your work experience, right? Not just a mock-up project. And if you're not on the list, feel free to get on the list right now on CuriousCore.com. We just launched a few interesting things. We even just uploaded a quiz where you can find out what your UX career path might be. It's not really specific to the fact that like you could be a UX researcher, a UX designer, or UX producer, or a UX writer. So we found that there are some very specific roles out there that might suit certain people more. So feel free to take the test. And that's it from me. Really appreciate your time, Nick, and you reaching out to connect with me. Thank you so much for your time. Just hang around a little bit more. I'm going to stop the live stream.
All right. Thank you so much.